So for the 18-year-old gymnast with no limitations, the first exercise would be standing on a balance beam sideways with their feet parallel to their shoulder distance, so spread apart a little bit, and the heels and their toes would be hanging over the edge. And they would simply lower their legs into like a squat position, and they would have their arms outstretched forward. This lowers their center of gravity, and it also places it in the middle of their base of support, and their legs spread apart also increases their base of support. And all this helps improve balance and stability, which would take a larger force to disrupt their state and gives them control of their position. So for the second activity for the gymnast would be a shoulder stability exercise. They would start in a push-up position and make sure that their glutes were tight the entire time. They would separate their feet to have it the same distance apart as their shoulders. This would increase their base of support, and then they would lift one arm straight forward, and then they would put that arm back down and switch to the next one, and they'd repeat this back and forth. This would prevent injury, and it allows the shoulder that isn't being lifted to take on the body weight and increase the stability of that shoulder. Okay, so for the 40-year-old male recovering from an ACL surgery, the first exercise would be a knee extension or flexion, and it's great for straightening the leg, which is important for mobility after tearing your ACL. And you can do this sitting up or lying down or standing up. And simply you would keep both your legs straight and then bend your knee inward and then straighten it straight out. And then you would just switch legs and keep repeating this. So for the second exercise for the 40-year-old male recovering from ACL surgery, it would just be hip abductions. So they would stand up in an upright position and then keep both legs straight, and then they would pull one out to the side and then bring it back in. And then they would just switch other foot. And you could also attach a elastic band to your ankle, the one that's being moved, and the other into something that's stationary. And this would add resistance to the leg in motion. And then placing your hands on your hips would help with balance. And this exercise can also be performed while lying down on your side. But pushing your leg against the resistance, especially with the elastic band, would improve stability as well as standing on one leg would. And this exercise helps strengthen the legs and tendons in the legs after that ACL surgery. So for the 55-year-old female diagnosed with osteopenia and undergoing menopause with no limitations, the first exercise would be a cross-crawl yoga technique. And the person would go down on all fours and make sure that the back is arched a little. And it's important that you don't use any hip rotation in this exercise because that's not what we want. They would first lift the left arm forward, and then they'd lift their right foot straight back. And this would create a straight diagonal line. And then they would go back to the resting position and then repeat with the opposite limbs. And this helps with stability and just increasing the muscles used for balance. The second exercise for the 55-year-old female would to take light weights and then walk on a treadmill with a slight incline. And then gradually you would walk for longer durations and then actually increase the incline heights. And then the walking improves balance, but the light weights will cause you to use more effort for the workout. And this can help improve bone density since she has problems with the osteopenia. So for the 65-year-old male with weakness on the left side due to a stroke, the first exercise would be walking heel to toe. And this could be a small exercise to start with, and he can begin with using the walker and then excel towards not using one. And he would simply place the heel of his right foot in front of his left, trying to get that heel as close as possible to the toes and possibly touching. And to make it easier, he could choose a spot in front of his feet to focus on, and that would help keep him steady as he tried to walk. And then you would take your back foot and step, placing it in front of the other, and then you would just keep walking forward and continue doing this. And it's a great exercise for basic walking and working on balance and regaining that motor memory after that stroke. So the second exercise for the 65-year-old with the stroke would be just crossing your legs over in front of each other. And typically, to start off with, he would hold on to some kind of ledge, a bed or a chair or anything, and he would simply take his right leg and cross it over front of his left leg, and then he would bring it back to the original standing position, and then repeat the crossing but behind the left leg, and then he would bring it back to the standing position again, and then he would repeat that but with the left leg. And this helps to increase balance and improves your range of motion in the legs. And as these beginning exercises after a stroke would push the left side mobility, and it would also reconstruct connections in the nerves and rebuild that motor memory after repeated action of these exercises. So for the 85-year-old male with no limitations, we would start with a postural sway test, and he would stand on his dominant leg and lift the other leg to the ankle height and not have them touch, and then cross his arms across his chest and keep his eyes open. And he would hold this for about 45 seconds, and then we would see how bad his postural sway was during this. And then we would just probably increase the time, and then he could switch legs and stand on the other non-dominant leg and repeat the exercise. So the second exercise for the 85-year-old male would be an intensified version of the first exercise. They would stand on their dominant foot again and lift the ankle of their other leg towards their knee. And they could cross their arms like in the last one, if that would help. And then they would hold this about for 10 seconds and then return to the resting position and just switch feet. And they could use a chair or some ledge to hold on to and work their way up to using just one hand and then one finger and eventually none at all. And these exercises not only act as lower body exercises, but it improves balance as well.